Sponsored by Ivan. Transfer Bitcoin and Ethereum anywhere.
And welcome back to Block TV, that time of the week for Blockchain on Booze, where we gather the wheelers and dealers from the sphere from all around the world and have them try and answer questions while staying sober. Today, such a treat. We have, first of all, a new victim, hello. Introducing our panel, first and foremost, Eli Sklar. This is your first time here, haha. Founder and CEO of Safebit, user-friendly platform for the crypto economy. Connects the various blockchains, wallets, exchanges to a single interface. That's basically I read you out loud. Now, next to him, one of our favorites, Jaguar Adva, head of Jaguar Lawyers. Great to have you.
Hi there. Hi there.
Thank you. The man we all fear, Yaniv Feldman, partner at Juno Capital Fund. Great to have you. And above all, a treat today, joining us from sunny Barcelona, where the Barcelona Trading Conference, the BTC, is just winding down, is none other than Agada Nameri, General Manager at 21M Capital. Great to see you. We all hate you.
Hi, everyone.
Looking lovely there at Barcelona.
Don't be a hater. Don't be a hater.
Entirely. Okay, folks, are you ready? Topic one, because we love this, because it's going to make headlines for the next God knows how many weeks or years. Libra resistance. Facebook's Libra is getting pounded internationally and literally ever since inception announcement. And this week, Federal Reserve Chair, actually in the last 24 hours of taping this, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell chimed in, upped the ante. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Libra raises many serious concerns regarding privacy, money laundering, consumer protection, and financial stability. These are concerns that should be thoroughly and publicly addressed before proceeding. And that's why at the Fed we've set up a working group to focus on this set of issues. We are coordinating with our colleagues in the government in the United States, the regulatory agencies and Treasury. We're coordinating with central banks and governments around the world to look into this. And I'll just add that the process of addressing these concerns, we think, should be a patient and careful one and not a sprint to implementation.
This is the head of the Federal Reserve, who many will argue is very afraid of the fact that another reserve bank is about to open. First of all, listening to his words, a lot of not just hesitance, but this needs to be a very slow process. What are you hearing?
There was another video that I posted a couple of weeks ago from Mr. Robot's third season, where there was a similar type of situation where a private company wanted to create eCoin.
Right.
I think the React sounded very similar to what we're hearing now. The words are a little different, but it's basically, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. We're the one printing money, and that's, yeah.
We're sitting here less than a week, or almost a week, to a very big hearing in the Congress, a congressional hearing. When it comes to Libra, David Marcus is going to have a lot on his hands. Do we even think that Libra is going to launch?
Sure, why not? I mean, it's like an ICO that people did back in 2017.
Really?
Looks the same. They have a white paper. They onboarded a bunch of companies, pre-sold whatever it is that they pre-sold. It's great. Sounds like a great ICO that they're doing. Raised $500 million, $250 million.
They raised $250 million, but they're also Facebook, and they're trying to do something that is unregulated at this point. And do we think it's an ICO?
Well, if anyone could do it,
it's Facebook.
Do it unregulated. It is not just Facebook. Bear in mind that Facebook has about 2% of that Libra so-called thing. It declares that it will be able to get it to the public, to everybody who's using Facebook. Will be able to advertise it the best as any company could, but it only has 2%. We actually have major financial institutions, so-called institutional corporates there, which is Visa and MasterCard and many others. And there are too many big of a players to not let it go, or to let it fall apart. And they have such an economic power that it will have to be regulated, and in my opinions, according to their demands, basically, because the regulators will fear that if they don't chase that fast enough, they're gonna miss the train.
They're going to miss
So
the
they'll
train.
make the
And it's-
regulations as accustomed to what those companies will need, those corporations.
And it's not the first time that Facebook is trying to push whatever currency that they're doing. It's third or fourth time that they're doing that.
That's what I'm wondering. And Yaniv, before, because I'm dying to hear what you have to say about Agada. You're in Barcelona. You're in and around crypto people. What is the talk of Libra?
Nobody's talking about Libra. It's like a non-topic.
Really? Nothing. Nobody's
No,
like.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's nobody is talking about anything else. I think I think the major topic as came up in this panel is the regulation and how it's going to affect Libra coming out, if at all. I have to say that I agree with Adva. I think at this point it might be too big to fail, or too many big names in it to let it fail. It might take a little bit more time and might suffer more scrutiny from regulators and limitations, but I do think they'll eventually come out.
Yaniv, do you think it will eventually come out? Because I'm waging my money on. I'm not going to wage, too much on it. I don't see this happening in the first quarter of 2020. Let's start with that. I think we can all agree on that. Maybe.
Listen, first off, I'll go even further, and I say it's a 30-40% chance that it will even go out. I think that there is a very strong likelihood that regulators will push very hard in their attempts to stop that. Basically, it's the biggest threat to traditional economy since Bitcoin. And I think that a lot of the governments see that way, if not even more, because Bitcoin doesn't have a single entity behind it, while Libra has 27, which one of them is the single biggest country in the world with 2.6 billion users. So I think that basically trying to create a global reserve currency with the potential ability to replace the dollar is definitely a threat that the US sees. I think that other countries see threats differently. Europe looks at the privacy of it. China and India are looking at the capital flight risks that it would bring. But for each of them, Libra represents a very big threat. And in contrast to Bitcoin, which cannot be stopped due to its decentralized nature, Libra is stoppable. No matter how big these players are and how much money they invest, fine, I agree. It's not, small startups, but compared to the US against the Libra consortium, the US has a little more guns in their armor.
Okay.
I have a secret to tell you about those large corporations. Having worked for Intel for several years, it is impossible to think, to even conceive the fact that the Libra people, head of regulations or whatever, CEO or whatever, whoever's in charge there, it is unthinkable. Think about that they haven't talked to the regulators in advance, or they haven't considered that and have taken steps in preparation for that. Maybe
I'm with you, and not at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theory. I'm wondering if there hasn't been a lot of talks in advance before that announcement
There must have
that
been.
Facebook came out with
Must have
about a month ago, right?
There must have been several months ago while it was on development, because they would not have developed and have given so many R&D costs and people, manpower on that, other than they would be authorized or regulated in such way. And it could be a game of the governance and Facebook and all the other corporates, kind of like a game of the governments showing or the regulators showing we might not be so welcome to accept it, and then they'll move step by step. But finally, I believe this will go. And just to remind you all that WeChat had done this before, not to the same extent, to the same level, but it has been done before by WeChat.
WeChat does not have their own currency. WeChat is controlled, governed, and censored by the Chinese government, and that's completely different. It's not borderless the way Libra is. It doesn't have the same effect on global economy the same as Libra does. So it's, I would say, like two opposite sides of the scale, in my opinion.
I would say it's a scale thing. It's like whatever
is,
Richard
but
had done,
these are-
they'll just do it much wider and more global, and much in that sense much better for them.
Agada, I'm wondering with you, people in crypto conferences, are they worried about? Are they afraid of Libra, or do they welcome it, or is it split in the middle?
The general notion at the conference that I was at now in Barcelona was positive. People still kind of have confidence that this would be a gateway for adoption of crypto, that it would advance regulation, or more clarity in regulation, which is needed in the industry. So generally, a positive vibe.
Generally a positive vibe in that respect. To compound the rumor and supposition, CoinDesk reported this week also that none other than the Winklevosses are favorably considering jumping in on the Libra adventure. Does that surprise you?
Not at all. I mean, they did business in the past. They
that didn't
did
end up
good
so well.
together. Well, I don't know.
Second round.
Yeah, second round.
Second round?
Zuckerberg, Winklevi, why not?
But doesn't
Sounds
that make
good.
Libra yet another? I mean, I'm going to really identify it right now. It's kind of rich people's, playing money when it comes to investment and whatnot. And there's nothing central about the fact that the people who are joining in on this, as we know, have to have millions of dollars or be the Winklevosses.
So first off, the Winklevosses also have a lot of money, but it basically is. It's creating the same kind of economic layer that we have in traditional finance, but without governments as intermediaries. In that sense, it's the same kind of money with the same, I wouldn't say the same, but a different kind of centralized control.
Right.
That's about it.
That's about it. That said, whether it's happening or not, as we said, I'm going to be talking to all of you throughout the next couple of weeks. There's a hearing coming up at the U.S. Congress, and I tend to agree that they're going to make it as hard as possible for this thing to come out of the gate.
But it will.
You think it will?
It will.
Okay, bets really before we move to another topic. Who thinks it's going to come? I don't think it's going to come out of the gate. Who thinks it's going to come out of the gate?
I'm pretty sure it's going to come out of the gate.
Agada, do you think Libra will happen eventually?
Eventually, yes.
We don't know. Raise your glass, Agada Nameri. Raise your beer glass. Thank you. Sorry, raise your coffee glass. My God. Salut.
Cheers.
What can I do?
Thank you so much for joining us from Barcelona. Before we move to the next topic, thank you. Before we move to the next topic, sponsorship. We'll be right back.
Sponsored by Ivan. Transfer Bitcoin and Ethereum anywhere.
Suffering from paying with crypto? You should know Ivan. Ivan makes it possible and easy. Ivan Digital Currency, the simpler, safer way to pay and get paid in Bitcoin and Ether instantly. Instant Bitcoin and Ethereum transfers. Speedy Wallet, multi-cryptocurrency wallet. Wallet recovery system. Transfer Bitcoin and Ethereum anywhere.
And we are back, blockchain on booze, on this remarkable end of the week where volatility can be the leading word. And we're going to talk about Bitcoin volatility for a second. At the time of recording this, who can help me with Bitcoin's price right now? Anyone?
Around 12.
Around 12?
700.
12,500.
12,500.
Okay, at the time of this taping, but if recent history is any indication, by the time users watch this Top Crypto show, but crypto might be trading anywhere from 10 to 15 or more. That said, who the hell knows, right? And that is a potential problem when it comes to Bitcoin. If one of the major features of Satoshi's invention is to be used as a store of value, how can it function as such when its price is so volatile? Or that as long as the general trajectory is upwards, all is good, but then when it goes down, nobody believes in the idea of Bitcoin. Peter Brand had a tweet earlier this week saying it's insane for people to believe that Bitcoin can ever become a store of value with that type of volatility. Is he right?
No.
Historically, not.
Okay, talk. Convince me why not.
First off, I have a few things about that. Historically, every time there was a new kind of asset that was perceived by the public as a store of value, it had huge fluctuations at the beginning. In addition to that, when you look at Bitcoin, as a store of value, you don't store value for days. You store value for years. You store value for decades. And when you look at Bitcoin from that perspective, you know, we're kind of good. And
You're talking about 10 years in, a little bit more than 10 years
No,
in.
Yeah, given 5.
Listen,
Okay.
from the 3,700 days that Bitcoin is alive, there were only 68 days where the price of Bitcoin was lower than it is right now. So, you know, considering value preservation for the long run, I would say Bitcoin is in a good place. And if you're really trying to look, you know, forward, which is hard for most people, but let's say 20, 30, 40 years forward, where there probably will be one coin for the entire world. Don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin or not. I don't know.
That's, okay,
But,
we'll get to that in a second.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe, but if we're looking at that and Bitcoin might be that option, one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. What differentiates is the pricing of goods and services in the market. So what moves, you know, different perspective is actually the dollar or the comparisons to Bitcoin and not Bitcoin itself. The purchasing price of the US dollar and other things is going down through the last 5, 6, 10 decades, while Bitcoin is moving the other
That's
way around.
asking a lot of people.
What?
That's asking a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? In terms of believing that, looking at it from your point of view, because if the mass public was Yaniv Feldman, they would see that trajectory.
Yeah,
but when we're looking at something that at this point we are everybody ourselves are covering it, it's up, it's down, it's up.
So that one thing that's important to remember is that people have a short memory and they don't remember and know history. The governments have asked the same thing from people when they invented fiat money. Okay, it didn't work for them. Any of the times they've tried it in the past, fiat money failed 10 out of 11 times. Now is the 11th time that it's done, and it's the longest time that it succeeded to survive. So I don't say, I'm not saying that it's going to fail again.
Right.
I'm just saying that according to history, there's a high likelihood that this experiment is going to fail.
I can also remind you about the dot-com era and
Right.
high-tech or startups or companies that went to NASDAQ, and Warren Buffett saying about, you know, this is an air fluff kind of an economy, the new economy, and everybody was against it, and everything boomed. It's just the same thing that startups and the high-tech companies shares, the shares of high-tech companies have matured and become more mature companies and more stable. It's the same, it was the new economy there. It's just now the newest economy right now.
It's the newest economy, but
Yeah.
it needs a flock of believers bigger than the niche
In the critical
market,
mass.
in the critical mass.
Exactly.
And Ellie, you're an early adopter, right?
Right.
Okay. First of all, let's start with what made you go into it.
I found out about Bitcoin early on in 2011, and I just fell in love with the technology. It was just after the kind of social uprising in 2010, both in Israel
True,
and
around the world,
inter-world,
right?
Yeah.
That was what was the
And,
Wall Street tagline? I can't even.
Occupy
Wall Street.
Occupy,
Thank
obviously,
you.
yeah. And back then, you know, lots of us young people, we went out to the streets and trying to change things. The cottage was expensive. The apartments are expensive. We're working our asses off, and we're not able to finish.
See,
the
I
month.
kind of feel still the same way. But okay.
Well, that's the thing. Exactly. That's the
like
that's
nothing
the
really
thing.
changed.
People get used to situations.
Yeah.
Even, you know, the
look at
story,
Spain,
the
look
story
at-
of the frog and the hot boiling water.
Right.
That's the same thing.
Well,
We
and
just get used to
Bitcoin
it.
just came out and showed us that there is another way. That there is we can write down a protocol that we all agree upon, and nobody can control to an extent.
To an
I
extent,
disagree.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah, to an extent. And it sort of works if we know how to make it work. It's better than the fiat economy that we have right now, because the fiat economy has a lot of power controls, and when you have areas of power, people tend to try to control those areas of power, and as a result, the system becomes unstable and unoptimized. With Bitcoin, the power is distributed. You have the miners, you have the users, and you have the developers. And not only that, but I completely disagree with the fact that you will have one single global coin. Simply because we already don't have that. We have Bitcoin is not just Bitcoin. Bitcoin is SV, is Bitcoin Cash, is BTC. Yeah, it depends who you ask.
Yeah, but what about the altcoins who aren't doing so well?
Well, some of them are doing great. I mean, some of them are doing great.
But there is a narrative. I mean, we're jumping ahead. There is a narrative that, you know, down the line, just like in the film, there will be only one. That that one will. I mean, do you think that not one, just one will survive?
No, I don't think. I used to think that way back in early days, but the way it looks right now, the pluralism, the diversity is very important, especially in this where we have this one protocol right now, like Bitcoin or otherwise, that is sort of gaining a lot of traction. We need the diversity. We need people to make mistakes. We need to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. Sometimes things that work today
aren't going to work tomorrow.
Exactly, and vice versa.
And vice versa. But that said, altcoins, and I'm just, you know, because we just kind of jumped to the dominance, and I'm going to make that segue. Altcoins, some of them okay, but have not been doing great this week, and it always seems that Bitcoin either drags them up with them or leaves them behind.
I think it's similar situation to Amazon back in the early 2000s or Microsoft or similar companies. I mean, you have a few leaders that are leading the market and you have a really long tail. Remember how many companies you had back in 2000, just .com stuff, you know, pets.com, that.com, this.com.
Pets.com.
Yeah. That's exactly what we're seeing today. Who's going to be successful, who's right, who's wrong? I don't know, man. It's time will tell, and it depends on the implementation. It depends on their tenacity and how well they're doing the business that they're doing.
And I agree that we need the mistakes of the market and the uphills and the downhills, and we need the opposition to the mainstream. And you know, variety and diversification is part of the main elements of this industry.
I mean, we do have a chart, Yaniv, before I let you, because I have a question for you about this exactly, because it is specific this week when we're talking about Bitcoin dominance. This was a narrative this week, and for a reason. It's come to the foreground because in the past month, Bitcoin's dominance grew from 55%. This is numbers, 55% to more than 65%. And the next 5 coins make up a further 20%. And then there are hundreds of other tokens that make up the remainder. But Bitcoin is the dominant. I mean, it's obvious that it's sticking. And why do we think this is happening?
So I just want to clarify one thing first. You know, when I said there will be like one coin in the future, I didn't mean that every other coin, all the other coins will die. It just meant that there will be one who will be used as a global reserve currency, the same as there is one today.
Sorry, what is that?
The global reserve currency, that's a dollar.
Depends by who, right? Some people store gold.
Who?
Global the Americans, for example, who base their currency on the amount of gold that they have.
No, they don't.
Not anymore.
Not today, but they used to.
They
won't give up their gold for any kind of amount of dollars or euros or bitcoins.
The dollar is not backed by anything today. They do hold gold, but it's not backed by anything.
It's backed by the American people.
It's backed by the American people and guns and airplane carriers and stuff like that.
Correct.
But it is used as reserve for the rest of the world, the same that gold used to be. I am saying that there will be other projects and other digital assets that will be used for a lot of things. I am saying the same as Jaguar said, the same Eddie said. I think that if we look at what happened in crypto history, we had the same similar situation in 2013, 2014, where we had a lot of altcoins back in the day that were, you know, the next Bitcoin. That was the story of that cycle, and 99.9% of them, I think, besides Litecoin, just disappeared all the way down to the chart.
So why won't that happen again?
It will. Absolutely.
And new ones will rise up to take their place, and we'll see new kinds of digital assets with new types of networks that exist with different use cases. And that's going to be a part of the cycle until this industry will stabilize, the same as the .com happened. like you said, there were tons of companies, most of them died out completely. I don't think that a lot of these coins will die out completely because of the decentralized nature of the industry, so they can't really die, but they will kind of disappear.
But as you mentioned, this happened in the
diminish
past. What
downstream.
would an altcoin collapse? I'm just wondering, mean to the players in this ecosystem? In terms of developers supporting business and platforms, does Bitcoin need? That's what I'm saying.
What did the .com say for entrepreneurs in the internet business? I think it's the same kind of thing. The potential is still there. The fact that the economy blew to outrageous, scale and kind of blew up afterwards doesn't mean that the technology isn't sustainable, that the industry isn't sustainable, that it's not going forward in terms of evolution and everything around it. I think that decentralization, blockchain, and all the technologies around it, Internet of Finance or whatever you want to call it, is a part of the next big tech revolution. Whether it's going to be like information age scale or something a little smaller than that, I do think that no matter what happens, it'll take us at least one more boom bust cycle, if not two, until we get to that same stable place after the .com one, similar to what happened after the
about
.com.
a decade.
I don't know if it's stable. Facebook is booming on itself. 2 billion users that they don't know how to control. They don't know how to leverage.
I don't disagree
And
here.
they have too much power, including the feed that you and I see on a daily basis.
Don't disagree at all, but I'm saying that what you saw since 2001 and all the way to 2019 is organic, sustainable growth. The entire world got into a place, I think, somewhere around 2016, where the entire global economy is completely inflated. And tech companies are those that benefit and inflate, I don't know if the most, but a lot.
You said earlier here that Facebook is the largest country on the planet today.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Libra is going to launch and it's going to be successful. And that's why Zuckerberg is sitting at the SEC and talking with them. And
the fact that
I
it's
can
the largest
assure
doesn't
you
mean
guys
it's
that
the
it will
strongest.
be fascinating to see that hearing.
That's for sure.
It will be, God knows, we'll be sitting there with popcorn
And
live.
and let me remind you, about 2-3
But
months
it's
ago,
not him, it's his conduit. You know that at the beginning, that David Marcus has to go and defend this whole thing.
2-3 months ago, I just talked here about the fact that Bitmain closed their
yeah.
offices and fired about 23 engineers because Bitcoin prices have diminished and went down. And the new news on the market right now is that they're reopening and they're rethinking their new ICO.
They're IPOing in the US.
Exactly. So, it's volatility changes, but
volatility is hard to sell in a big group of people. That said, before we move on,
maturity,
because we're about to speak about a very big player in the sphere, but before we move on, sponsorship, and we'll be right back.
Sponsored by Ivan. Transfer Bitcoin and Ethereum anywhere.
Okay, speaking of players that really play in the sphere, and we know they're here to last, and not only that, they're clearly the biggest. Binance launching margin trading, okay? It announced ahead of the second anniversary of its launch that its users can now trade some cryptocurrencies on margin using the exchange's newly launched trading hub. Margin trading, of course, will be available for BTC, Ether, XRP, BNB, TRX, up to 3 times leverage. The new service is paired with the existing cryptocurrency exchange under one platform, dubbed Binance 2.0. Now, I'm quoting, CEO CZ, so to speak. CZ said, "This is another step in providing an inclusive cryptocurrency trading platform catering to the needs of both advanced institutional traders and retail traders under the same roof," said the man and the legend that is CZ. Should there be margin trading in this space?
Why not? What's wrong? If a company produces a new product, it's catering to someone. It's catering to a certain group of people who want that. They want to invest in crypto and they don't have the vehicles for that. If you want to invest in Israel in crypto, you're getting a lot of hurdles to pass. If you want to invest in crypto in the States, a lot of hurdles to pass. What's wrong with Binance producing another product that people actually want?
It's the same like CFDs for shares and commodities in Chicago or high-tech shares in NASDAQ.
Who is this for then? I mean, who is the audience for this? Traders that?
Yeah. Or hedge funds as well, which specialize on those areas.
Good or bad?
Again, I don't disagree with them.
However,
I don't disagree with them. No,
But you don't agree either.
I always like to give the contrast.
Okay, go ahead.
Otherwise, it won't be interesting.
Honey, that's why you were here.
One of the UK just banned the use of trading CFDs and margin in crypto. The reason behind that is that they think that there are no basic, good enough fundamentals, and it's pure speculation, and it's something that's going to hurt the retail audience that just use it for gambling on crypto. While again, I'm not all for gambling on crypto. I think that crypto in general has sustainable fundamentals for the long run.
Just going into crypto is gambling.
I think that margin trading is a part of a hedging strategy for every financial asset, and it's definitely needed if used in the right place. But I do think that Binance, as a retail-driven platform, is definitely looking more at the dollars in front of their eyes when liquidating positions, and less of the favor of what the public wants. Yeah, the public wants to gamble, but again,
the public likes booze, right? You
Yeah,
remember
no,
in the early 90s, 1900, in the early 20th
What,
century.
prohibition?
from
Yeah.
from a
Prohibition.
business
That was, they said that this is
from
bad
a
for the
business
public.
perspective. From
Yeah.
a business perspective, I agree. Again, it's the right thing to do for their shareholders because it will probably make them much more money than traditional trading.
and if they don't do
does.
it, another competitor will do it.
Okay,
Right.
let me ask you this about Binance. I mean, there are already, and I'm playing devil's advocate, arguments that Binance is becoming way too strong for everybody's good. What does it do for Binance?
In what sense?
Having everybody
Does,
else's
no,
jealousy.
no, just does it make it too strong?
No.
Does it make it too strong?
We also say that Facebook is too strong. What can you do about it?
I think that Binance.
You and I
basically-
aren't marching in the same demonstration. Go ahead.
I
What
think,
can you do?
that Binance basically, they invented or reinvented the new strategy of regulatory arbitrage, where in contrast to Facebook, that can, I'm not saying easily, but can basically be shut down if U.S. government wants to. Binance will be much harder to do that.
Why is that?
Because they're playing regulatory arbitrage, and if the U.S. government decides to declare war, it will be harder for them. I'm not saying impossible. Everything is possible because we're living in a physical world yet. Still, but it will be much harder for them. They'll need to play regulatory catch-up with Binance, and the biggest, direct thing they can do is just decide not to let Binance play in the U.S.
Which would be
Which
great
kind of
because-
Binance decided on its own that they're almost to do
exactly.
until it's being resolved.
I haven't seen the shareholders report, but according to public records, most of the revenues do not come from the
United
US.
States.
Anyway.
Right.
Anyway, so having a new powerful entity or company or organization, my opinion, is just a part of the free market. That's what happens every year or decade or couple of decades. New companies create and attract a lot of force and power, both from an economic standpoint and business standpoint. You saw that in the last century. You had General Motors and
I was about
IBM,
to say, in other
and
words,
now you're seeing
capitalism won.
Amazon.
Stick
And
with it.
Capitalism
no, I'm
always
saying that
wins.
free
Yeah.
markets
Free market, and it will
knows
see a
how
rise.
to control these things, and these things change over time.
Finally, though, is there anything about, do we think, because this is a question posed in the sphere, do we think that the timing of the announcement, is there anything other behind it apart from Binance's no-holds-bar approach, just rolling out products?
Maybe it's a good news to compensate for the so-called
for the
bad
so-called
news
right.
of the limitation of the U.S. Players. Could be.
That's actually a good
Usually
example.
public companies look at, when they do PR, they look at, when they release bad news, they very quickly try to find some good news to balance that, the price.
Oh God, yeah,
the share.
and politicians. We're just adding something
Yeah.
apropos volatility, Bitcoin sustainability, where it's heading. And this is not a doomsday prediction, but I am half German, so I really want to talk about this. Moving along, Deutsche Bank. Okay, as Deutsche Bank dominates the mainstream media, and it did this week. Okay, whether it's rehaul or one can argue its spiral into demise. Some in the sphere are making a distinct connection between the upward trend, or the possibility of an upward trend of Bitcoin replacing the old system. And that is, I'm going to quote you guys, first of all, both Anthony Pompliano, of course, pumping in and chiming in about this. The Morgan Creek Digital Asset co-founder tweeted, Deutsche Bank plans to fire almost 20,000 employees. Bitcoin has no employees to fire. DB is built for the old world. Bitcoin is built for the new world.
Way to go.
Maddie Greenspan of Blockchain and Booze fame, and also of eToro, said, "This is what." Wait, I essentially made myself happy. Noted, this is the effect of prolonged. This is Maddie. Prolonged zero interest rate policy. Central banks are making it impossible for investment banks to turn a profit. Many in the sphere, and to be honest, even I myself, when I looked at what happened with Deutsche Bank in the last, I would say, 5 years, and then what they're trying to do right now, which sounds eerily similar to what banks and big companies tried to do in 2008. I'm not saying that we're on the brink of that again, but do we think there's a correlation between rises we saw?
So, again, the crypto market and Bitcoin specifically is still very speculative. But there are very strong underlying fundamentals that global macroeconomic conditions are a huge part of. We're seeing countries or economies all over the world stumbling down. We're seeing inflation rising. We're seeing interest rates lowering to negative levels. If we're looking at big banks, there was a very interesting Twitter thread this week looking at European banks. While what happened to Deutsche Bank was unfortunate, there are dozens of European banks that are on the brink.
Deutsche Bank is a 150-year-old prestige bank that ran Europe.
The oldest bank in history, an Italian bank, I don't remember the name right now, from 1492, just went under 2 weeks ago.
Maybe they bought Bitcoin.
What?
Maybe they bought Bitcoin.
Could be. But again, Deutsche Bank is huge, but the phenomena and its effects is way bigger than Deutsche Bank. I think it's a signal,
right?
But it's just one out of many.
One out of many. Yeah. Back to Bitcoin and blockchain. As we begin to wind down, folks, blockchain supply chain market looks primed for major growth. I personally am one of the mind of why has it not grown faster, to be honest, when it comes to supply chain and blockchain. Moving from crypto to the more general world of blockchain technology, a new study by market research and consulting firm Allied Market Research estimates the global blockchain supply chain market will amount to $9.85 billion by 2025. That's around the corner, showing an 80% increase of the compound annual growth rate from 2018. Now, just based about this, is supply chain at the end of the day blockchain's most promising utility?
It's part of it. I mean,
right now it's the only thing that, well, I don't want to say the only thing, but it's the one thing that shows sustainability.
Except being a currency and a store of value and smart contracts and storing
arguable, and then there's supply chain.
You asked why didn't get catch on. We have to remember that Bitcoin technology as a proved blockchain as a technology, as a proved product, as a proved utility, exists only for 10 years.
Exactly.
If we compare that to computers, right, just computers, we're in the 1950s, 1960s.
Exactly.
If we could compare that to the internet, we're in the late 90s, early 2000s. So we have a lot of way to go. We still don't have Facebook, we still don't have iPhones, we don't even have the Apple iPod yet. That's where we are at the Bitcoin.
At the beginning of, at the inception.
You must remember, 10 years is a very little time. All of us who are in this community and industry, we live this daily, on a daily basis. We do business in this, and we store value, and we exchange, receive fees in Bitcoin, etc. We do business, and we live that. However, everybody around us, like our grandfathers and mothers and aunts and uncles and the cab drivers and people who just work.
Yeah.
But all these people, they don't leave it. For them, 10 years is just the cradles of this industry. It's the very beginning. It's only 10 years. And bear in mind that in 2008, it was of the cyberpunks people around this. Even in 2009, still.
Yeah, just
Even in
cyberpunk.
2011, like Elon was one of the beginners one of the first to begin in this market, and everybody's jealous of him and that. And way to go for you, man.
Oh my
But
God, I'm
still,
about to, I'm not going to ask you that question.
No,
Yeah,
no,
go
no,
ahead.
no, but still,
Ask
remember,
Tal that question.
but the time that corporates, and not to mention even companies and developers as companies, not just geeks and developing in their homes and in garage, have entered is only very few years. It's not even 10 years. And it used to be, the anarchists, alternatives, new thing of those cyberpunks, etc. But it has matured very little.
Very little.
Only
My
last few
concern is,
years.
and I'm wondering why it's not more prevalent with, to be honest, with the teens of this world.
Tools, utilities, they don't have it.
utilities.
They-
I
The
love
next generation.
Education.
I love industry research predictions because they're based out of absolutely nothing most of the time.
Just like polls.
And no, I can do the same prediction. That by 2025 the supply chain blockchain market will be absolute zero. It's based
And
on
posted, it's very true.
both of them have pretty much the same likelihood of succeeding, even though, again, my opinion, and as one who judged or researched a lot of companies doing blockchain for supply chain, I don't see the use case. Obviously, there's a lot of hype around it. Obviously, there are a lot of corporations trying to build something on top of a technology that is very
I actually think
buzzed,
that supply chain
but-
and blockchain in medicine can actually break open this entire business.
I agree.
I think that's the one place that if it can eliminate mistakes in
Imagine knowing
operation rooms.
exactly what you have in this beer.
So is
But I mean
verifiable.
but again,
so is every cryptographically signed database and every other things. Tokens and blockchains have
They're here.
no meaning and no actual usage in the space. Obviously, there are a lot of things in the world, including supply chain and medicine and a lot of other things that hasn't been truly digitized. They're in the same place as finance was until Bitcoin arrived. And I do agree that they should be digitized. I just don't think that blockchain is the way to do it.
I must be a party pooper here for
Please.
just a slightly on
then
the database related area, because I also deal with GDPR preparation for companies to comply with all the regulations of data privacy and databases, etc. The blockchain is a huge database, and companies that will try to use that as a database specifically for healthcare and medicines, more specifically than any other information about people, will burden the costs and the fines of the GDPR agencies.
because of
around the world.
privacy, it's a twofold. But that's a conversation you and I can have now for an hour. I
Exactly.
agree,
Yeah.
but and everybody stands to gain from it, but it's going to be very hard to pass.
Yeah,
It's going to
you
be
need to-
incredibly hard to pass.
And the regulators will have to adapt their rules
Their-
accordingly to a very new era of a database, which is the blockchain.
We need to
It's
pass,
something
we
completely
need to
different.
move on from a time where the Howey test is still applicable.
Exactly.
But that said, folks, I want you to raise your glasses. Apropos predictions, we're closing the week. We're somewhere around
We're-
11 plus.
We're empty.
I know, you are empty, and I sadly cannot
To be
get up.
corrected.
So hold on. Yes, there you go. Sorry, I like to sniff my alcohol before that. We are going to raise the glass. You still have beer, and predict or just raise our eyes at the end of this week, this phenomenal week, at the beginning of July. By this time next week, there you go, salut. By this time next week, 14?
15.
15?
15.
You said 15. You're not going to call it 15? Yaniv?
I'm saying range bound.
I'm actually on the 13,500.
Blockchain and booze, ladies and gentlemen. This was a pleasure.
Yep.
We'll be right back.
Sponsored by Ivan. Transfer Bitcoin and Ethereum anywhere. For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.